Hello, my name is Tania Leon. I am the founder and artistic director of an organization called Composers Now. And it is actually our pleasure, the fact that we're going to have a conversation that is very meaningful to us. And it's a conversation about the Cheswatyr Foundation and the first commission that has been given to a very wonderful composer that actually I would like for her to introduce herself, and a wonderful mentor, also a wonderful composer that I would like to for them to introduce themselves as well. And this commission is in honor of Cici Wasserman. Cici was an incredible supporter of the arts all over the city and in the nation. And she commissioned many, many composers and composers that happened to be women. And she was also the vice chair of the board of Composers Now. Somebody that we all loved and we had a relationship with, something that these two composers will be able to speak about. So before actually talking about the performance that's going to be held on October 15, why don't we open this conversation, and then, in the process, we will talk about our collaboration with the international composers. The International Contemporary Ensemble. Speaking of composers, so therefore, and how the International Contemporary Ensemble have actually joined forces with the Cheswatyr Foundation composers and Composers Now in order to create this premiere that is going to be actually, I know that the performance is going to be incredible, but this premiere is going to be held at Skirball, is New York University Skirball Theater, and on October 15th. So we will actually offer you more details at the end. So, all right, so it's all yours, Nilo and Suzanne.
What do you think? I think you should go first. It's your piece.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Tania, for the wonderful introduction. My name is Niloufar Nourbakhsh, and I'm a composer, and I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to find out about Cici and write this piece in her honor, and to be mentored by the most wonderful composer, Suzanne Farrin.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind. I'm blushing. My name is Suzanne Farrin. I'm a composer, and I was really fortunate to get this time with you, Nilo. It was such a wonderful experience and such a great opportunity. After I realized recently, I was reflecting on this, and we've been trying to get in the same place for a long time, right? I think since 2015.
Yeah, when I was applying for grad schools.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a while. It's really been a while, and we've just never been able to quite get ourselves in the same place. So this was such a wonderful chance to kind of spend some time together and think about music and life.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess one of the wonderful things about this mentoring session that was really unique for me was how open you were in your approaches to this mentoring session. And you mentioned that we started talking about life and then how to reflect that into the music itself. And I really appreciated how much courage you gave me to just dream about whatever I wanted to dream, and not worry about it not working out. And that really gave me a lot of courage, and also encouraging me to actually travel to Vancouver to hold a workshop there, which was extremely valuable to the development of the piece, because for the piece, it's a collaborative work with a designer who's also a composer, Roxanne Nesbitt, who's designing this sculpture that will interact with the instruments around the theme of connection that very much relates to what Cece has done in the new music scene. Yeah, I don't think I was also brave enough to be like, I'm just gonna go to Vancouver. and that encouragement really was important in building that relationship with Roxanne and finding what's right for the sculpture and for the piece.
I'm so happy to hear that. It's not a sacrifice to spend time thinking about your music, Nilu. It's really a pleasure, and you're on such an adventure that it's just not hard to do. It's not hard to get into it, and that's kind of I think part of what I like about working with composers and having composers as friends, and is that we can move between these worlds so easily and so quickly. We can get and have to get so technical about what we do, almost like a scientist, like this specific pitch at this quarter tone and this many cents, and I want it here, and this is placed, and we can talk like that, and then we can also talk poetically, and we need both of those things, right? If we sat around and talked poetically all the time, we would probably just like not write any music. We would just be happy with that and then write a poem or something. So we need that other sort of action that is beyond language and is in a world that requires technical knowledge and execution, from both you and the composer and the performer. There's a high level of training that goes into both sides, and we need that. So and your work is wonderful to think about and talk about and experience because you comfortably live in those worlds so well.
Thank you. I don't believe you, but thank you.
well, all right. Well, I'm glad you heard me at least.
If I would like to say that I agree with everything that you actually have mentioned, Suzanne. The experience of Niloufar sound is very deep. I don't know, it hits you deeply. And that is something that I would like to actually get the opportunity to ask Suzanne, to ask Nilu, and later Suzanne. You should actually talk about these too. But what about your experience, your life experience? Talking about your experience and the fact that nowadays we're talking so much about your origins. Even people that don't know. Your country of origin is being mentioned, and but one of the things that I am always interested is to know the impact of the society, how you grew up, the sounds that you heard, the music that surrounded you, and how that lives in you and then is transformed into all these scientific details that, whether you like it or not, it's sort of like slips in, it's sort of like all of the sudden appears. And for us newcomers into your sound, all of that sound exotic to us, but to you, it's your natural, that is your accent, that is your language. So if you could talk about a little bit of that, and then, if Suzanne could also touch base with that, because you also have a world of imagination that surprises many, and that is the secret of each composer in a way, So Nilu.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Tania, for such kind words. I'm just so grateful that I also had the opportunity to be mentored by you, Tania, and completely revolutionized my mind about time and how I think about time. I never forget that. As you mentioned, my origin, I come from Iran. I was born in Iran and raised there until I was 18. And when I was 18, I decided that I want to live as a musician and try it, and applied to colleges and got the opportunity to come to the US on a student visa. My upbringing is that my family is rooted in a Sufi tradition, and we were a religious minority in Iran. All my siblings played classical Iranian instruments. We had a music group every Thursday. Multiple people would come to our house and we would all play together. And I had a keyboard that I could change the quarter tone tuning of it, so I could actually play an Iranian scale. And I played with them, and we recorded an album. Yeah, so I had all these like really amazing collective experiences playing with Iranian classical music in a Sufi tradition. One of the, I think, most important things that I took from that is the idea of repetition is very strong in Iran classical music, but also in Sufi music, where the music is kind of a tool to take you in a meditative state. And so that idea of repetition is very present in my music. And also in this piece that you will hear. And I think that it was something that came from that upbringing, as opposed to like a movement, like a minimalist movement in the US. And also I think just, growing up with Iran, it's a complex society. And also filled especially with a lot of tragedies in the past 40 years. And so I think my music tends to be really dramatic. But yeah, I am myself not very dramatic, but somehow my music is very tragic and dramatic and operatic, I guess. Yeah.
That's so interesting. That reminds me of when I was teaching, my first teaching job. I had a student who was a little bit concerned after hearing my music and not understanding how my disposition could create works that were so tortured. And you're not saying tortured, and I don't hear torture in your music, and hopefully my music doesn't sound tortured anymore. And she didn't use that word, but that there's that we have our personalities in our lives and the way we interact with people, obviously, and then we have this space for art, which allows for a huge our big hearts and our big imaginations to come out in really complex ways.
That is interesting for me to hearing dramatic and torture. I mean, not all of them, but the pieces that I am familiar with, I mean, for me, they are gripping.
Oh, thank you. That's nice.
Yeah, and they're visceral.
Yeah, yes.
You see?
Yes.
So, I mean,
Yes.
that is part of what a human being is all about. So, therefore, both of your languages are very human, at least for me, I mean, it might be a different perspective for another listener.
Yeah.
In my case, it's visceral. I feel it in my gut, I mean, it's hard to describe what that is, but perhaps, and that happens to any listener, it could be the music that we write, or it could be, I mean, a specific song that touches the heart of somebody, or a specific instrument, or it has to do with sound, and the discourse of that sound in that given amount of time, and how you walk away with that memory, that is nothing that you are prepared for. It grabbed you. Yeah, Suzanne, you were going to say something.
Oh, no, I'm loving hearing what you're saying, Tanya, and it's making me think, and it makes me remember this feeling of, we don't always, we try our best, all the time, and we things happen, things come out as they come out, we try our best. But one thing that I think is the sort of fundamental of all of this is an attempt at sincerity, is that I think that's part of what we respond to in each other, is there is a deep sincerity here. And that sincerity is so impactful that it creates a memory, because our music sometimes doesn't cause you to walk out singing the tune, but
Yeah.
it does. I mean, sometimes maybe it's, not that, we don't want to eliminate that possibility, but I think what we offer is a kind of emotional, psychological experience that is the memory of living in that space. And I think it's governed by the kind of deep sincerity that we practice writing from that place of sincerity. And that hopefully is what comes through.
Yeah. Speaking of sincerity, it would be nice to speak a little bit about who Cece Wasserman was.
Yeah.
How she inspired all of us. She touched all of us in a very, very profound and human way. And not because, she was actually supporting the arts and supporting, what we do one by one. But I remember the enthusiasm of Cece, when we went to Central Park to watch the sun eclipse, for example, and procuring the things to protect our eyes and everything. And she was such an advocate for living in the moment. So, for her to talk about composers is like she was engaged with each sound, and she would talk to one about the other at the same level, of respect and embrace at the same time. So if you could say something, about her.
Cece reminds me of how, we don't do this work on our own. We're very solitary in our studios, and we are kind of loners in a way. We have that aspect of our personality as composers, but she was the kind of personality that always brought you back into the network and the people and the talking and the community. She was very good at that, and she was very good at spotting that in you, even if you were kind of like all, twisted up working on your piece in your head. She had this ease in the way she communicated and bonded with people and supported you with kind of just an open heart, and had an enthusiasm for the process, which really helps me. That kind of energy helps me work when I work with other composers, is to just, that kind of genuine interest. It's a really special and valuable thing. And there's so many people that work to support this kind of activity and endeavor of making music. And as we were talking about Cece, I really can't separate her from, she's going to get really mad at me, but Amy Frawley, who has also been behind so many projects and so many organizations. Yes. And I just want to say that too, is that it's, Cece was really great at bringing everyone together who cared about the mission of making more music happen in society.
Yes. And what is your experience of Cece after Cece? I'm talking about you, in this case, Nilo. Yeah.
I unfortunately never got the opportunity to meet Cece in person, but I've been trying to live in her role and get to know her for the past 3 months really. And as you've both mentioned, it's been very interesting for me to discover how touched every person in the New Music Circle that have interacted with her have become, and that they they don't just talk about Cece as just a supporter. It's a very special relationship that every person who talks about her have developed with her, that is very holy. And so because of that, I started to collect memories from people who've been really touched by her, supported by her, commissioned by her, And through all these memories, you can see, as you also mentioned, that the power to see the beauties in just the moment, and also the power to see how to make a change, and how early on CC supported women to make a change in our field, and that's just so dear in my heart for what she's achieved. And I mean, she's supported and commissioned so many women who is my generation above that became my mentors. And if they didn't succeed, I would never think that I would be a composer. And it's because of those mentors that she supported that I decided to be a composer, and that just means so much to me. And so, the idea of the sculpture for the piece is that the instruments are connected through this sculpture as a metaphor for what CC has done, and that it lives on even though she is passed.
Yeah. And it's good to actually, and I'm glad that Suzanne, you brought Amy Frawley into our thinking right now, because, for example, it's interesting what Cici was able to do. I mean, it's like a web of people.
Yes.
Coming from different walks of life, and unifying them for the same purpose, and it had to do with the artists. I mean, she believed in all kind of voices. It didn't have to be a particular voice. And by the same token, she was actually one also of those that supported the International Contemporary Ensemble from the very beginning, because I mean, she was very close to the founders, including Claire Chase, you see. So therefore, I mean, it's like everywhere you go, and you mentioned Cici has something to do with that, or it will have to do with that project, and and she's how she actually, came to Composers Now. It was about composers, and she marched in right away and took over, meaning, that somebody that I could trust with my eyes closed, because I know, that this was from the heart. And it was not a gimmick. I mean, it was really, really something that that united all of us. And I'm very, very, in my case, I feel blessed that I had that opportunity to be with Cici almost until the end, And now, of course, that her daughters are the ones that are being able to create projects. And this is one of their main projects. I mean, is the one that is commissioning the women in the field, and in whichever level, mid-level, emerging, and senior. It's just a wonderful situation. Yeah.
I would just add to that, that the International Contemporary Ensemble is the other secret ingredient in making this really work, to work with, that I've worked with them for so long, and I've known them since, some of them since the beginning. We kind of grew up together. Yeah. And that the spirit of adventure, that's the key. And this kind of attitude that you're going to work it out, that we're going to find a way, and it's going to work out, and to be so supportive in such a profound and three-dimensional way, which is what International Contemporary Ensemble does, is similar to Cici in that way. It's not just, making something possible by kind of at arm's length, helping something move forward. This is someone who really had a gift of connecting people. And that's also what International Contemporary Ensemble can do. They connect with so many composers across so many generations now, it's the kind of attitude that makes you want to go back to the desk. right? And that kind of influence on our lives. Composers are always looking for that, like, what helps me write? What helps? What helps? A great collaborators like International Contemporary Ensemble, that helps. People believe in you, like Cece and Amy Frawley. That helps. Our colleagues, Tania, knowing you, Nilu, like, we help each other sustain this effort of making art and living.
Yeah, yeah. I feel that this is sort of like a tradition because, as you may recall, one of the first board members of the International Contemporary Ensemble was Pauline Oliveros.
Yes.
And, Pauline was out of the box.
Yes.
So, speaking about everything is possible.
Yes.
You had to just get
Yes.
together with Pauline.
Yes.
And so, I think and I feel that now, by amplification and tradition, from generational tradition, from one generation to another, it is expanding, you see. And the collaborations between the two of you, you being the mentor and then Nilo being the recipient of the mentorship, that is something that 20 years from now, Nilo would be mentoring someone else, you see? And it's just fantastic because, I think that the era that we're going through in music right now is very healthy.
I agree. It looks so different. When I was coming up through conservatory in the 90s, it didn't look so exciting. And I certainly didn't see myself anywhere, not to disparage too much, but it's not the excitement that I feel now. I did not imagine that composing life would get better, and it did. It does get better, it's getting better and better, I think.
Yeah. So Nilo, would you share some thoughts about the piece?
Yes, definitely. And
the name of the piece, because it's very, very intriguing.
Yes.
The way that you
yeah, it's letter C and then C, and then C and meaning seeing. That's the title, of course, inspired by Cece's name, but also by her spirit and wisdom. So yeah, the piece is in 3 movements, very contrasting movements. It involves a sculpture, a fishing line wheel bow that goes through our string instruments, including the piano. And I actually really pushed my compositional approach in many different directions in this piece. So I hope it comes out as a good piece because it's different from my previous pieces very much so. But my harmonic language is there. The idea of connection is at the center of it. And even in the second movement where the wheel bow is no longer bowing all the string instruments, I have the instruments themselves moving through it, which I've been calling an instrument dance. And the title of the second movement is also a dance. And I think of it as a dance of life. And it's the second movement, as much as it's about life, it's also about death. And it's also inspired by a poem that Cece wrote that Emily, Wendy, and Stephanie also kindly shared me different poems that Cece had written, and I really connected with this one, which is called A Faded Photo, and hopefully we can share that in the program as well. And it's, I think the idea of loss is also very central in this piece. And International Contemporary Ensemble also lost one of their colleagues, Ryan. And that was also on my mind as I was completing this movement and really thinking of him. I was really grateful to have met him, and I was also thinking of Ryan in this movement, and also my mom, which I lost myself 3 years ago. So yeah, the idea of a dance, a life, and a loss, and a cycle is very much present. And the third movement is a kind of going beyond, and it also deals with freedom as well, because a lot of times connection can also bring responsibility as well. And so it's just an investigation into these topics. So don't want to give too much away, but basically the string instruments would be untangled from the wheel bow for the third movement. The idea is that even once the sculpture is not a part of the piece, that the instruments still come together to make one piece together, one music, one sound.
Beautiful. Wow. You know, I'm intrigued when you're talking about this string and the instruments. Actually, the musicians will be moving. Aha.
Yes.
I see. Oh my God.
I hope it comes out good. I don't know how well it is.
Okay. All right. So I think that we have covered a great deal. Anything else that you would like to bring up? Suzanne, I'm just moderating here.
Yeah, sure. I was thinking about your piece, Nilo, and another aspect that I'm fascinated by, that, is this, we've talked about this a lot, but this connection that takes the form of the sculpture, right? And the string is connecting all of these people together, and we think about that in terms of a person who had a large impact on a community like Cece did, and how you're sort of left with these bonds even when the central person who strung them together isn't on stage. You're left with these bonds, and the dance is a really interesting facet of that, because the dance sort of pushes both this, okay, I can move this far and I can move like this, but I can't just move any way that I want. So I'm both, my sound is kind of liberated by this because it's changing my sound and it's making something different. I have the beauty of this connection that I'm left with, but I'm also constrained a little by what is this sculpture, right? So I think that's always, like, the complexity of that is what's interesting, and that you really kind of dive into all the meanings there, which I really like.
Wow.
Thank you.
This is wonderful, because we were talking about how Cece was creating this web uniting everybody.
Yeah.
And you are both surprising me, because I had no idea that this piece was going to actually, sort of like symbolize something that that we have been discussing prior to your revealing. Yeah, that is a wonderful, wonderful situation, and well, this performance is going to be on the 15th of October. I believe that the starting time is at 7:30, and I perhaps later on, if you happen to meet the audience, you will be able to elaborate more, about the response to the piece, or what the people are going to actually feel about, seeing these musicians moving on stage with which is very different than what we are accustomed to see, a musician coming in, sitting in front of a music stand and playing a piece. So yeah. So anything else that we should talk about that we haven't touched base with?
Well, I'm looking forward to this concert, and we're all going to be there, and it's at NYU Skirball.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I can't say how lucky I am. I'm such a lucky person. And thank you, International Contemporary Ensemble. Thank you, Cheswatyr Foundation. Thank you, Cece. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Tania. And thank you, Suzanne. It's been such a journey, and I'm very grateful. And I hope that the piece will be good.
Yes.
Oh, well. And
And
thanks to Bridget Bergen for also making all of this possible, bringing us together, keeping everything focused
I
and
know.
working and
Bridget.
functioning. And like Cece, there's so many gifts that people bring, and we need all of them.
And what I want to add is that we're blessed and fortunate that Cece sort of like, or Cece's daughters, talk to us as at Composers Now to be the home of this project, which is this is just the beginning. And we plan to embrace it the same way that we embrace her. And we were talking, and I was remembering that dinner that we had, precisely Amy Flawley, Cece, and I. And it was winter and it was cold. And there we were looking for restaurants, and the first restaurant was packed. We couldn't get in, and we ended up in another one, and we took pictures and everything. I mean, yeah.
Sounds like a New York night.
Exactly. We have those memories. It's like me talking about, let's go to Central Park and watch the sun,
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's about living fully.
Yeah.
With in the arts and relationships and sharing our humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you to you, Nilu, because this is really, I'm so happy that we had this opportunity to be together and, to start our friendship, because it's just the beginning. And it's really, you don't get those chances all the time. So I really deeply appreciate that. And Tania for, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to begin. The support and the imagination and the heart,
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So seems to me that this is Bridget.
Yeah, we can say goodbye for now.
That was great. I'm gonna stop recording.
Okay.
now.
Don't hate me, Amy. Please don't